council to order. Will the clerk please call the roll? I'm here.
I'm here. Councilmember Barrett. Councilmember Clay. Councilmember Stevens.
Present.
Councilmember Sniffer.
Here.
Councilmember Wade.
Here.
Councilmember Clay won't be here this evening. She's out of town. I think Councilmember Barry will be here, though. I believe he will. The next item on the agenda is council comments and announcements. Are there any comments or announcements? I saw Ruben's first and then you, Joy.
I just wanted to say I had a very productive meeting this week with folks at Columbia Union College concerning ways that the college could work more with the community, take advantage of the fact that the college is full of young, enthusiastic people, and the community has a lot of youth and others who would benefit by interacting with them. And we had a very productive talk, and I will be following up with the rec department and others in Tacoma Park to see if we can't get some cooperative stuff going.
Sounds very good.
Two things. One is I was pleased to be at the D.C. voting rights march this afternoon. Even though it tried to rain us out, the weather did not succeed at discouraging many of us, and it was definitely a step in the right direction. I was glad to see so many city officials as well as people from other jurisdictions who are there to support D.C. in their drive to get voting rights in Congress. The second topic that I wanted to touch on is has to do with the House and Garden Tour, which the city has supported with in-kind services, and then last year with a grant of $2,500, and then this year we also were extending to them that same amount of money. When I was at a committee meeting with the Old Tacoma Business Association, it was brought up that a shuttle service would be very helpful to tie together the business community with the House and Garden Tour. Right now it's just all a pedestrian event and people drive or walk from their homes to go to the event. What this would do is allow for stops along the way that were strategically positioned at places where they might want to have dinner or a cup of coffee. Or meet up with people at one of the locations where the shuttle would stop. And I would love for the council to authorize the city to further this. The Folk Festival does a shuttle where 2 ride-on buses are commissioned with drivers, and it costs between $300 and $400 per bus. So we're talking about $600 to $800 here, and I'm open to suggestions about how we make that work with the $2,500 that we've granted. But I would like to see us do this because I think that the city's interest is in community building in a large-scale way and making sure that any events that we're supporting have the biggest impact possible. And I think tying together the business community with the very important House and Garden Tour is a great direction to go in. So, but we do need to act fast because the House and Garden Tour is March 6th.
May 6th.
May 6th, that's what I meant. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. Last Monday night when we came to this council meeting, it was following a disappointing incident along Maple Avenue in Ward 4. We had a very large display of graffiti painted on the sidewalks and the buildings and the bus stops along Maple Avenue. And I just wanted to, tonight, express my real appreciation to Chief Rakucci and the many officers of the Tacoma Park Police Department for the extra level of enforcement and attention that they've paid to our neighborhood during this last week. It was very nice to see the attention that was paid to this serious incident in the neighborhood, and I wanted to let the officers know how much the residents, many of the residents of the neighborhood appreciate what they've done, and that they have asked me to thank the officers. Thank you.
Any other comments, Bruce?
Yes, I just wanted to mention 2 neighborhood association meetings coming up this week. I usually don't announce those, but the 2 associations in Ward 3 are having their first meetings in quite some time. So just wanted to make sure to get the word out that Circle Woods is meeting tomorrow night at John Nevins Andrews at 7 o'clock, and the newly reconstituted SS Carroll Association is meeting Wednesday night in this building at 7:30. So if anybody hasn't gotten word on that and wants to attend, those are both happening. And I believe that's the first SS Carroll meeting in about 3 years.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
I was very pleased to be present this afternoon for the Montgomery's Best Honor Awards program. I got a certificate of appreciation for participating in the Joint County Gang Prevention Plan. The name on the certificate was mine, but actually credit for this should go to the many people on the city staff who have worked for at least a couple of years now trying to implement the recommendations of the Joint Task Force. We now have a youth services center in the Tacoma Langley Crossroads serving young people who are at risk, and there's efforts being made on many other of the recommendations that the committee recommended. Unfortunately, as the police chief reminded us just last week, this is still a very dangerous area, and I think that was proven once again by the crime that occurred over the weekend. A very serious crime, and even more serious because of the time of day at which it occurred and the fact that it occurred in public. And so I think that although we have focused some attention in this area, I think that the chief is exactly right to feel that this is a priority for continued focus by the city, by the police, and by other prevention efforts, which are actually more effective than once someone's in a gang, obviously that needs to be dealt with, but it's much more effective to prevent young people from getting involved in gangs. So I was very pleased at that award, and very pleased that the Joint County Gang Prevention Committee got recognition. As I said, I think most of the credit for this should go to the staff members who helped implement the recommendation to set up this youth services center in the Crossroads. For the record this evening, I would like to enter into the record 2 proclamations. One recognizing Chief Jim Jarboe for 50 years of service to the Tacoma Park Volunteer Fire Department, and the other recognizing Tacoma Park Volunteer Fire Department former Deputy Chief Ted Jarboe, again for 50 years of service. These proclamations will actually be presented at the fire department's annual banquet this weekend. I know at least Bruce and I are going. I don't know if other council members are going also, but those proclamations will be presented to the recipients at that time. I won't enter into the record the condolence to the family of Janice Martin. That resolution, I'm still working on that, and we will enter it into the record at a later time when it's completed.
And Ruben is going to the, no, not going? Banquet, fire department.
The fire department banquet. He is going. All right.
As am
Okay.
I.
Okay, so
All right, so-
4 people are going.
Well, that's very good. I'm glad to hear that. I think it would be nice to have a nice turnout in recognition of the 2 Jarboe brothers and all the many things that they've done for the community. I won't even read the proclamations because one of them barely fits on one page, and one even with Jesse and Peggy's best efforts wouldn't fit on a single page. And that isn't even including all of the things that we know that they've done for the community. So we will be presenting those to the recipients at the banquet. The next item on the agenda is the public comment period. This is the time set aside for comments on items that are not on our regular meeting agenda. If you have comments on the regular meeting agenda items, I'd ask that you wait till we come to those items and then speak to them at that point. This would be the time to speak to items on our work session agenda or to any other items you wish to bring before the council, and ask when you come up to speak, if you will identify yourself, and if you could keep your comments to 3 minutes, please. Thank you.
Yes, my name's Pat Lovelace, 7620 Maple Avenue in Tacoma Park. I don't know if you people have heard what happened today down at Virginia Tech. The final toll was 33 people shot to death by a crazed gunman who got into the engineering building today. There was 2 incidences. One was this morning when 2 was killed, and another one this afternoon when 31 was killed, including the gunman himself. And I was wondering if the city could somehow send down a letter of condolences, from Tacoma Park down to, I think it's Blacksburg, Virginia. It's the Virginia Tech School. And I'm wondering if they could, you people could all get together and send down some kind of letter of condolences, to recognize the 33 students and faculty that were killed, and I think it's 20 or 30 others that were injured and are now in surgery in various hospitals. And also, I think people today who happen to be seeing this should sit back and think what we can do to prevent this kind of violence, whether it's educating our kids against gangs, against drugs, against warfare, because we got to realize too that the war has come home to the hood. We are dealing with the fruits of our labors in our own backyards now. And I think, that we have also today lost 5 troops in Iraq. We just lost 5 soldiers in Iraq on top of this all. So we really got to start thinking, where do we want our country, our community to go? Do we want to continue on the road to destruction we're going? Or do we want to all start becoming aware and start participating in the world around us to make it a better place? We had a wonderful demonstration last weekend with the children and stuff. George Bush had his Easter egg roll, and we had our cluster bomb roll, where we had, little artificial bombs made, and the kids who found the most of them got a prize, got some candy, and so forth. But we got to take this very seriously. Those 33 students are not going to come back. Those 5 troops we lost today are not going to come back. There's 38 families now that are grieving unnecessarily because of some random and some planned acts of violence. We've got to do everything we can. I would like to ask the city if they could put a note of condolences out to the school, and also get awareness to what's going on. And anyone who's viewing this, please do what we can do. Participate in our nonviolent peace demonstrations. Participate in your church affairs. Do everything we can to get our neighbors active. Get the Young Activist Club in the school. I'm still really proud of them. And I want to know if their petition is still out. I'd like to sign it. But please, I would like to ask the City Council, can you please send down a note to the Virginia Tech faculty and members? Could you please? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pat. We'll try and figure out something that we can do. Appreciate
Put
it.
that on your agenda as soon as possible, because I think that'd be a great thing for Tacoma Park to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Would anyone else like to speak?
Yes, good evening. My name is John Hume, and I am the chair of the Design Committee of Main Street Tacoma. Main Street Tacoma is an initiative of the Old Tacoma Business Association for downtown revitalization. And I'm here tonight to invite everyone here and everyone within the sound of my voice who can see me to come on out and participate in this year's second annual Main Street Tacoma Cleanup Day, which will be Saturday, April 28th from 9 a.m. to 12 noon. And it will be 3 hours of intense community activism to clean up our Main Street. Our Main Street stretches from Lee Avenue at Tacoma Junction to the Tacoma Theater on 4th Street in D.C. We're asking volunteers to gather on Saturday the 28th of this month at Tacoma Junction, at Morrison Park, at the Clock Tower on Laurel Avenue, and at Triangle Park on 4th Street Northwest in D.C. We'll be cleaning up the gutters and the sidewalks. We'll be picking up litter and trash. We'll be weeding, mulching, planting flowers in our public spaces. Main Street is providing the trash bags and the gloves, and all we're asking you to bring is a desire to pitch in and make things better. Also, if you have gardening tools, we can use them. We'll label them and get them back to you, and we've never yet lost a tool. So I'm asking everybody to just put aside 3 hours, maybe on Saturday, April 28th. Come on out and join your friends, your neighbors, your families in making our city a cleaner and more beautiful place to live in, because that's exactly the kind of city that we all deserve to live in. So I hope I see everybody on the 28th, and I thank you.
Well, thank you, John. Appreciate that reminder. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Lisa Moscatello, and I just want to announce an event that is taking place on Thursday, April 26th, a question and answer session with State Senator Jamie Raskin on the subject of impeachment of the Vice President and the President. And residents of Tacoma Park are also invited and encouraged to come down to the National Mall on the 28th to form a human word, impeach, at the bottom of the mall, which will be photographed from above. Thanks very much. Oh, the 26th is going to be at Montgomery College here in Tacoma Park. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak? All right. If not, we'll move on to the next item, which is the city manager's updates.
Just a few items on the community center project. As I had mentioned, I believe it was last week, we had a state inspection of the new elevator, which unfortunately did not pass. They re-inspected the elevator today, and I'm pleased to inform the council that it did pass the state inspection. There's still a few minor details, just kind of hooking it into the security system and the swipe card system that remain. But I'm hopeful by week's end, anybody who wants to come by will be able to take a ride on the new elevator. So, I had mentioned last week that we are scheduled to meet with James F. Knott Construction to try to go over where we're at with some of the punch list items. That meeting was originally scheduled to take place last week. Unfortunately, the Vice President of James F. Knott Construction had a last-minute conflict, and I felt that it was important that he be there since he's the decision maker for their team. So we will be meeting with them early next week, and hopefully we'll continue to make some progress on resolving all the outstanding issues. A few items unrelated to the community center. Last week when I did my budget presentation, I made mention of the homestead property tax credit. There may have been some confusion that residents needed to actually apply for that credit. That is not the case. That is an automatic process, and I just wanted to make that clear because there was some confusion about that. I also wanted to update the council about the Carroll Avenue Streetscape project. I know staff has received inquiries from I think at least 2 members of the council, and just wanted to let you know where that project stood. As you may recall, this was going to be funded with the 2004 Community Legacy Funds. As originally envisioned, those monies were going to be used for construction of a garage, and we were going through the process of having those monies reprogrammed for the Carroll Avenue Streetscape. That process is still moving forward. Initially, we had thought that all we needed to do was just go through the Board of Public Works. It appears that because of the age, if you will, of the funds and the reprogramming status, the state is having some discussion about whether we go through the Board of Public Works, if that's even necessary. So that is being reviewed by the state in terms of what process we actually need to follow. So I know there's been some confusion and some concern about why nothing has been happening. There doesn't appear to be any issue whatsoever with the appropriateness of using the funds for the project. It's just a matter of getting through the paperwork, if you will.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes, certainly.
From what I understand, the contract that the council awarded is in jeopardy of being honored. Can you say a little bit more about how the city will handle this delay?
The last information that I had, Councilmember Austin Lane, is obviously we were concerned whether the contractor was still going to honor those prices. The last information I had is that that was not an issue, though obviously this process is taking much longer than any of us had anticipated. Rather than misspeak, what I'd like to do is just touch base with the staff tomorrow, who's actually in direct contact with that vendor, and get an update for you.
I appreciate that.
If I could just add that my understanding as of the end of last week was that they were still ready to honor it.
So continued delay with this Board of Public Works issue is threatening this contract that we would like to proceed with.
I don't know if I'd go so far, Councilmember Austin Lane, to say it's threatened, but certainly if I were a vendor who's been holding a price for some time, I might have some hesitancy given that, gas prices are rising and other costs. It is certainly a concern. I'm not going to lie to you about that.
Do we have any date certain from the state when they will make a decision, release the funds, put it in front of the Board of Public Works, in some way square this away?
Not yet. We had been in contact with the comptroller, who obviously is a friend of the city and one of our residents. At this point, my understanding is it's not really a matter for the Board of Public Works at this time. It's being reviewed by the Attorney General's office in terms of just the process and procedures. But we do not have a definitive date at this time.
Okay. Could you just make sure that we get more information
Sure.
as soon as you have it?
Sure, I'll be happy to do that.
Thank you.
Two last items. I did want to mention to the council that the Joint County City Municipal Revenue Sharing Task Force will have its first meeting on May 1st. As the council is aware, I am one of the municipal representatives for that. My fellow municipal colleagues and I met last week up in Gaithersburg just to do a little pre-meeting planning. But anyway, that first meeting will be May 1st. And then the last item I just wanted to add to Councilmember Siemens' appreciation for the police department. I thank you, Councilmember, for recognizing the fine work of our men and women of the Tacoma Park Police Department. I did want to share with the council and with the community just some statistics from that initiative. The department issued 48 state traffic citations, 4 written warnings, 8 safety equipment repair orders, 11 field interview reports, made 2 arrests, and posted 7 individuals for trespassing. So it certainly was a very active effort on the part of our police department. Chief Rakucci did ask that I share with everyone this evening that certainly they'll be keeping a close eye on the Maple Avenue corridor, but also giving similar attention to other areas of the city that are facing problems of a variety of sources.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. Ms. Matthews, I appreciate the numbers you provided on the policing work that was done along Maple Avenue. I mentioned earlier that I've heard from a number of residents of Maple Avenue who were appreciative of the policing efforts that took place during this last week. I didn't mention that I've also heard from some people who were not as pleased with the policing efforts along Maple Avenue. They felt that maybe the police were responding in a too aggressive manner, not physically, but just stopping people who felt that they were stopped, were innocent of any wrongdoing and being stopped and questioned. This was especially true of some of the young people and in particular the young men who live in the neighborhood. And I've given that some thought, and I think it might be helpful because this does seem to be a new type of policing that's going to be done in Tacoma Park. I think it might be helpful to have a forum, and I plan to host a forum of the young people in the neighborhood to discuss these policing efforts and to make sure that we don't have a biased approach to the enforcement of the laws in the neighborhood. I haven't as yet picked a date, but I will be making that announcement next week at the council meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just mention, certainly I think there's a natural tension between trying to be responsive to concerns that are being expressed to us, and I know they've been expressed to you as well, and certainly our intention is to make sure that any type of traffic stops are done in an equitable and fair manner. I do believe that the police department may have received one complaint that I'm aware of, similar to what Councilmember Siemens just talked about. Obviously, that will be investigated, internally within the department, and that is an important priority for Chief Rakucci. We discussed that late this afternoon.
Yes, and I just make it clear, I don't in any way want to interfere with that investigation. That's a separate matter, but some of the complaints that I received were of individuals just along the street, not even in vehicles. So
Sure.
I think it's an important thing, because I think this is a change in the community, a change in the policing, and I think it's important that we give everybody an opportunity to participate in the process and make sure it is fair.
Yeah, thank you for that, and please let us know if we can help in any way.
Thank you.
That's it.
Are there any council questions of the city manager? All right, if not, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. We're beginning the items on our regular meeting agenda. And the first one is a contract for Public Works uniform cleaning and rental.
Hi, I'm here tonight requesting permission for the city manager to enter into a contract for uniform cleaning and rental service. As you may or may not be aware, the Public Works Department provides uniforms to both our full-time and part-time people that work in the field. It is a provision of the city contract, and it's been in place for as long as I can remember, which goes quite a few years back. We've solicited bids for uniform cleaning and received 2 responses, one from the company we currently have and another from a competing company. The prices that were offered by our existing company are quite reasonable, in fact lower than what we're currently paying by almost half. The other company's prices were slightly higher. In the bid, we made some suggestions for some changes and some opportunities that I saw available for us in starting another uniform agreement. Primarily, staff has expressed to me an interest in modernizing the uniforms that the city staff currently wear, making available things like cargo pants that are a little more comfortable for staff that do a lot of bending, moving, and so those will also be available in the new contract. We've also requested pricing on reflective shirts, which would primarily be used by our sanitation division, with very bold stripes down the back and front and sleeves, so it negates the need to have to wear a safety vest and makes you very visible when you're riding on a truck or working along street sides. So we've got some real improvements possible to the staff. They're quite upbeat and excited about it, and looking forward to kind of a revised understanding with the current vendor. They've been in service to us for quite a few years. The current arrangement would, or the future arrangement would enable us to have a 2-year contract with the ability to extend for an additional 2 years, and then we would bid out again. We have been, I don't know how many years it's been since we had a bid or a contract price, because our uniform contract enabled it to roll over again, but we've seen in this process that there's some cost savings for us in bringing it back out again for bid. So it looks like it's going to be a very positive change for us, and we'll save the city some funds as well.
That's very good. Thank you. Are there any questions for the Public Works Director? If not, would someone like to move the ordinance?
So moved.
Okay, it's moved and seconded, I take it. Is there any council questions or comments? Is there any public comments on this ordinance? All right, seeing none. Since this is a single reading ordinance, this is money that was in the budget, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Porter?
Aye.
Councilmember Austin Lane?
Aye.
Councilmember Barry?
Aye.
Councilmember Clay? Councilmember Stevens?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Williams?
Aye.
The next item is the lease of a portion of the city-owned parking lot at Tacoma Junction for the temporary fire station, and I hope this means that the temporary fire station is imminent.
Yes, we're moving ever closer, though at a snail's pace. This is a necessary next step in the process of moving this project along. Montgomery County has put out to bid, and I believe maybe have perhaps even received bids right now for the construction of the fire station itself. This piece that we have before us tonight is the formal arrangement between the city and the county for the partial use of the what's locally called the co-op lot or the city-owned parking lot adjacent to the co-op and Johnny's Auto Clinic. The county will require about a third to a half of that parking lot space to be used for the storage of vehicles while the new construction of the station goes underway, as well as trailers for the fire department staff to live in, basically, while this project is going. They still are talking about a 2-year construction window, though our lease agreement has been made for 3 years in the event that, as construction projects often do, extends beyond the planned time frame. However, the arrangement is written such that as soon as the construction is done and they can take down a temporary station, they will quickly move to do that. This has been a very positive experience. I think that the city stood firm in terms of working with the county on this lease arrangement, and I know the mayor in particular was very firm with the county about needing to see some shared funds for the use of the lot, basically, since the city owns that lot with loan funds. So the county agreed to pay $1,000 a month for the use of the portion of the lot that they're going to be using, up to $12,000 a year. In addition to that, when the county is finished with that lot for the temporary fire station use, the lot itself will be repaved, which any of you who've driven on it know that it's sorely in need of resurfacing. So that they will leave the site in a much better condition that they found it in. An additional thing that's going to be done on a temporary basis is because the existing driveway apron in and out of that parking lot will now be, well, once the temporary station is put in there, will be used for fire trucks only. It will be a direct access in and out for the fire equipment. There will need to be a new driveway apron that's created in the middle of that lot to enable the public to come in and out of the parking lot, provide the co-op parking spaces as well as business visitors parking spaces. So that piece of the construction will be done by the county through permits and agreement with the State Highway Administration. So that has all been worked out and will commence as soon as they're ready to go with a contract award. My understanding is that the construction of the temporary station is one of the first things that has to happen in order to move personnel and equipment over, that then enables them to start the deconstruction and then reconstruction of the fire station itself.
I'd like to move the resolution.
Second?
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any questions, Bruce?
Darrell, is your understanding that that second apron that you just mentioned is temporary and will then, as part of their renovation after they finish with the lot, that will disappear again, or will that stay?
It's been proposed as temporary, though there's been kind of an openness about it, both on the part of the city's part and the county's part, that if the city was interested in maintaining that or leaving it in place based on potential future use for the site, it could be. So it's kind of an open-ended area at this point.
Thank you.
Other questions, Joy?
Just wonder about the 3-year term of the lease. What would take place if the new fire station was constructed in less than 3 years and they were able to remove the temporary station sooner?
Then the lease agreement would end.
Okay. And then can you just give us an idea of how much income the city would not be getting because of the co-op not being able to lease the parking spaces?
Oh, the co-op will still be able to lease the spaces that they're currently leasing in the rear of the lot, so that relationship wouldn't be affected.
Okay. And in the lease, are you confident that the requirement for them to repave is squared away?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's clearly spelled out.
Are there other questions? Any council comments? All right, it has been moved and seconded. Is there any public comments on this resolution? All right, seeing none. All those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution passes. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the second reading of the ordinance that's the Budget Amendment 3 for the current fiscal year.
Yeah, I went through a fairly detailed explanation of the various reasons for this budget amendment. I'd be happy to go through those again if the council would like, or answer any questions you may have.
don't think we need to go through it. There's been there didn't look like there's been any changes since
No,
first
there
reading.
have been no changes since first reading last week.
Okay, would anyone like? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any council comments, questions? Any public comments on budget amendment number 3? All right, since this is the second reading of the ordinance, will the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Peters.
Aye.
Councilmember Austin Lane.
Aye.
Councilmember Barry. Councilmember Clay. Councilmember Simmons. Councilmember Sniffer.
Aye.
Councilmember Williams.
Hey, aye. Two
Okay.
things at once.
You were reading what you were writing here. The budget amendment passes. The final item on our regular meeting agenda is the consent agenda. There are 2 items on the consent agenda, a resolution providing for reappointments to the Personnel Appeals Board and a resolution providing for appointments to the Facade Advisory Board. Would someone like to move the consent agenda?
Second.
Okay, the consent agenda has been moved and seconded. It's not subject to discussion. All those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The consent agenda passes. Even though we are running a little bit ahead of schedule, we are going to take our break at this point, and then we are going to move, as soon as we come out of our break, into the work session agenda. item on our work session is an update from the Health Services Impact Committee.
Like the temperature here.
We're trying to keep everyone awake here.
We understand that global
Is that why you're half an hour ahead of schedule, because it's cold?
Maybe we should do this all the time, huh?
Like a hospital.
We're only 6 minutes ahead of schedule, and the boiler is out.
Yes, we've heard.
So people are permitted to wear their coats, several coats, your mittens even. So, are you going to introduce this, Vanita?
Okay. Good evening, Council. Next to me, I'm here today to talk with you about the Health Services Impact Committee. I am the staff liaison, and to my left is Lois. Lois is one of the chairpersons, and we also have Andrew Summers, who's also the other co-chair. And on the other side, we have Pat Lovelace, and Pat Lovelace is one of the members who wants to make some comments as well.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
Lois and Andrew are going to basically talk to the council about their accomplishments or things that they've done and other concerns that they have.
All right. Well, what would you all like to inform us of at this point?
Well, at this point, we wanted to update you on, what we've done over the last 6 months.
Great.
And where we're going from here, and then also tell you about some problems that we've run into that we think you can help us out with.
Okay.
First and foremost, we've had a couple of community outreach meetings, one at Victory Towers and one here in the Azalea Room, I guess it was, the other night. The one at Victory Tower was particularly, I think, successful. We got at least 40 people, and for understandable reasons, very interested folks with a lot of things to say about their particular healthcare needs, both in light of the potential or impending, however you look at it, departure of law, and just in general to find out where they get their primary care. We were surprised to find how many folks are actually using places like the Washington Hospital Center and the VA hospital and institutions that aren't quite as proximate to Victory Tower as WA is. We've had a meeting with Jerry Stocks and Robert Jepson from the hospital, and actually had a second meeting with him that was more of a happenstance meeting, but a lengthy meeting a couple of days ago, and Jerry will be back on May 1st to the community meeting that we're holding here at the community center. Looking forward to that, particularly in light of things that have been happening with the PG hospital system. I spent a fair amount of time talking to Jerry about that 2 days ago. We've had a bunch of problems, though, one of which is we have serious attrition. We've lost more than 40% of our committee since beginning, and that's hampering us both because our committee no longer really represents a very good cross-section of the community, and also, frankly, we just need some more hands. One of the things that we have done is we've designed a survey that we want to field, a community survey. We were a little late to the party for getting as many questions onto the survey that you're going to discuss later this evening, as many questions onto that as we might have liked. So we have designed a survey, but we don't have any money to field a survey or to input the data. We have talked to WA about the possibility of assisting us with funding, and they've responded favorably, but our sense is that they would probably respond even more favorably if a few, if not all, of the council members and the mayor, put in a word yourselves, just to sort of nudge them along. I've spoken with Jerry about this. Jerry's spoken with Bill, and we're sort of awaiting word on that. But without funding either from them or you or both, we're not going to be able to field this survey. And we really do think that it would be very valuable, since the outreach meetings are difficult for many of the people that we want to hear most from to even attend for, reasons of either physical disability or timing or what have you. Do you want to say anything?
Sure, I'll just add a few things to that, and I think you all know that you formed this committee to look at the impact that WA leaving our community would have on the community, and as we began to work on the community, we realized that the issue was much, much broader than that, and when and where WA is going is certainly up in the air, and the timing of that is medium term at best. They're not leaving tomorrow, even if they had a spot and had the funding. Tomorrow it would be a good 8 to 10 years before they had a facility. And so our original mission as looking at what would happen when they left morphed a little bit into looking at what are the needs of healthcare for people in Tacoma Park. And there was an interesting case of a woman who's lived in Tacoma Park for a long time, about 10, 12 years, that was brought to our attention this week, a woman who lives just 2 or 3 blocks from here and works full-time in one of the stores on Carroll Avenue, which is a store that's active in the Old Town Business Association. And her brother put out something on a local listserv describing the fact that she has invasive cervical cancer and that she's having a radical hysterectomy this week at Washington Hospital Center. And he was reflecting on the fact that she was somebody who was not lucky enough to have health insurance, although she's always worked full-time. And she she's a single mom, and she put other economic needs in front of her own preventive health care needs. And I think we all know that getting treatment for invasive cancer is certainly costly emotionally to the person and their family, as well as to the society as a whole, because somebody ends up paying for that, and we all end up paying for it in some way or another. And it got us to start thinking a little bit about many of the progressive things that Tacoma Park has done and stood for over the years. I can think everything from Free Burma to being a Central American refugee city. And I know that many of you are concerned about issues of healthcare and healthcare access. In fact, many of you, including the mayor and Councilmember Austin Lane, work in issues related to healthcare and healthcare policy. And we began to think about the possibility of exploring with the city some kind of, with the Old Town Business Association or with Tacoma Langley Crossroads, some kind of way to allow people who at least are employed in city businesses to have access to some health insurance or some way to purchase health insurance as a large group. Obviously, we know that all the business owners in Tacoma Park are strained economically for a lot of reasons, and it's hard for small employers, even if they want to be able to insure their staff, to be able to fund that. But we were hoping that together with the committee that we could begin to explore with the council ways to really be in the forefront of accessibility for healthcare and making sure that people like this woman who lives over here on Maple Avenue get the preventive care they need, and making that a priority for the city and for the Old Town Business Association to look into creative ways to have everybody who at least works in the city have access to health care. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, and I touched on the fact that I know many of you, and I guess Councilmember Snipper as well, works in an area of health and health policy. We really want to partner with you and have your expertise help us and really figure out what are the healthcare needs in Tacoma Park. And to that extent, we really invite you to come to one of our specific meetings to talk more closely, to have more of an interaction, not just our reporting to you what we've done. I think on our committee, many of us are interested in health. I myself am a nurse practitioner and provide care to the day laborers at Casa of Maryland and to the homeless at Shepherd's Table through mobile medical care. But other people have other experiences that may not be clinical, that may be more policy oriented, and we're really hoping that you can share your experiences and your background with us, and that we can make this Health Services Impact Committee more of a joint venture between the council, and so that's another one of our hopes for the future.
One member of the committee who couldn't be here tonight, but who's also a member of the Old Town Business Association, really was hoping that the council could help OTBA think about possible ways of pooling, doing some sort of not small market reform, but some sort of pooling of businesses in Old Town and in Tacoma Langley in order to reduce the cost of health insurance and enable some of the business owners to actually provide insurance. There are all sorts of both legal and regulatory, difficulties there that some people on the council are more familiar with than others, but I did want to pass that along and suggest that in addition to examining just the basic needs of members of our community in terms of where they get their health care and where they will get their health care in years to come, that we might also want to look at insurance issues, as Lois was suggesting.
I got one thing I'd like to ask too is we do need more hands on the committee. Like he said, we lost 40% of our people, our members. It would be nice if we could get representation from all 6 of the city's wards. Having some wards represented and some wards not, I think is a handicap to our committee. And also, it'd be great if we could find a way to reach out to the Spanish community also. We do need that.
Council, it's also important to let you know that the committee has made efforts to reach out to the community, other neighborhoods that apparently we're not getting the populations to attend our various meetings. We're having a meeting planned for May 1st here in the Azalea Room, and efforts have been made to announce the meeting in the city newsletter. Also, we're working with several of the Latin community news media to get the word out to various communities, and also the various tenant associations, specifically New Hampshire Avenue, the New Hampshire Towers area, which because our meetings are here in the community center, oftentimes the group of folks do not make it over to here. So we're making efforts to put the word out to utilize the tenant associations to get the word out that way as well.
And we know that going to the communities themselves is a better way to reach folks because they don't have as far to come. And one of the things that made, as Drew said, the meeting at Victory Towers so successful is that we went to them, and these folks are all elderly and with chronic diseases and had a lot to say about how they get their health care. And we'd like to replicate that in other neighborhoods, but because of the shortage of people on our committee, finding a place that can house us, that Benita keeps reminding us it has to be ADA accessible. The community center on New Hampshire Avenue, they seem to be booked up with their activities there. The public schools don't really want to let you in because they have security and custodial issues in the evening, or they're using it for other events in the evening. So our initial idea was to go out to places where the community congregates, and that proved to be hard in part because of our man and woman power shortage on the committee to really be able to find places to hold these meetings and then to do that outreach. So we settled for having them here because it was really easy. We just had to schedule the room and do the PR for it, but it's not ideal in terms of going out to people.
And to be frank, we actually did identify some places that we could have used for outreach meetings, but we needed a minimum of 100, maybe $150 simply to pay for whoever locks up, and then the janitorial staff that had to stay, for instance, at the church the 2 churches that we had identified as possible places, things like that. With no budget at all, we can't even do outreach meetings, much less the survey.
And in that sense, we really hope that the council members who know folks in their areas, even if it's a house meeting or an apartment meeting, or you know the pastor at the church in your ward, can be influential in helping us get these meetings out to where the people are, because I think that would be a richer experience than the people who come to the community center. It would be more representational of a broader grouping of people in Tacoma Park than the people who would come here to a meeting.
I know that there's a budget for council committees. It's not a very large budget, but I thought it was sufficient to pay for very minor expenses like that.
There is not a budget for every committee. There are certain committees that have budgets. Those have typically been established in conjunction with the council, so certainly that's at your discretion.
Because it's certainly, nominal amounts of money like $100 is not, we could certainly cover that. We could give you a budget to cover that. My guess is that the survey would be considerably more, and so that would be a bigger discussion. And let me just address a couple of things. One is that I think it would be helpful if you could give us a list of who are your current active members, and so we can see where in the city we need to fill in and what maybe demographic groups within the city aren't represented and who on the council might be able to help with getting people from those groups. Maybe if you could, send that to the council, we can take a look at it and see what we could do. This would be an appropriate time to take a look at a budget for the committee. As we said, we provide very small, not big budgets. I think one of the other committees had a budget for like cookies at their meetings. I mean, we're talking that kind of money. And the other thing that I think your notion of sitting down with council members, I certainly don't have the expertise of some of the other members on the council, but I would love to sit down with you and talk about some of the things that you might do. The other thing I was thinking is that, as you know, a bill to try and expand health care access in Maryland just about almost made it through the state legislature. And I think that there are people who are very interested in that kind of thing, and that would certainly help people in our community, even if it was only low-income children that were covered. That would still be an enormous impact and would make some of the things that you mentioned, Lois, much easier to do if children were already covered and we were just talking about adults. That's a fascinating idea, and I'd love to explore it. The other thing that we have so many people in Tacoma Park who are experts in so many things. I bet if we put the word out, we could find someone who had enough background in sort of insurance pools that we could maybe figure out where to start with something like that, because it sounds like a fascinating idea, and I'm sure it's been done other places before. We would just need to figure it out.
We've already identified at least one person who's an expert in that area.
Oh, good.
So that wouldn't be too much of a problem. I did want to say something about the survey, though, simply because I know that simply by virtue of how this is set up, you're going to be discussing the community survey, when we're done. And while it's absolutely true that the survey is more than just cookies or janitorial money, the sort of money that we would need doesn't come anywhere close to this community survey, simply because one of the members of the committee is already an expert in survey research and could do the analysis, and we've already designed the survey, and we really would be looking at postage, photocopying, and maybe a high school student or a college intern to simply input the stuff into a statistical software program, but we would not be looking at needing to hire, an outside consulting firm to do our statistical analysis or anything like that. So the monies would be far, far less.
Have you put together a budget for that?
No, we haven't put together a budget, but that really has more to do with the fact that I don't have the numbers of how many households there are in town, and I've never had to send a survey, out. I'm certain that you or Vanita or both probably have the numbers already together for that sort of thing, and we could figure out very quickly how much the photocopying and things would cost. The only thing that I personally, and I think Lois as well, we don't know is what sort of availability we might have, or what sort of access we might have to high school or college interns who we might be able to take advantage. It's the wrong way to put it. Whose services we might be able to avail ourselves of in order to, get the data pumped into, a program that we could then use to do the analysis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Thank you, Mayor Porter. And thank you all for the work that you've done on this committee. It's a huge undertaking, the whole health care issue. You've mentioned several aspects of it, just the access to health care and some of the other things. But, there's, I went to a meeting last Wednesday at the Impact Silver Spring office up on Sligo Avenue on affordable health care. And there were representatives from many of the organizations around the county, that the nonprofit organizations that are interested in health care issues. And they kind of focused in on just the inadequacy of information on how to work the existing system for low-income residents of the county to get the health care that is provided through one program or another, but it's not, there are no clear steps on how you gain access to that health care. I talked with them at the meeting about your committee because there seemed to be this overwhelming need of information and kind of a disjointed approach that's used now with many government agencies that provide assistance, with the many organizations that work with the clients that are trying to help them through the system. And I suggested that they consider coming to your May 1st event so they have a chance to share some of what they understand of the problems with you. One of the attendees at that meeting at Impact Silver Spring talked briefly with the group about maybe presenting to you an idea of working with your committee and using the Tacoma Park East Silver Spring area as kind of a test case to see how they could help working with you to provide for better health access and also a better dissemination of the information that's available. So I certainly wasn't in any position to speak for your committee, so I didn't volunteer you to do that, but they should be, at least maybe some of them, coming to your meeting on the 5th. I'm trying to get a list for you of all the organizations that were there and their contact information so that you can extend an invitation to them if you would like to. And maybe that helps you a little with the membership issue. If you get some people from outside the city too, but I think also I know we have a Ward 4 representative here tonight, and if we need someone else from Ward 4, then we can see if we can find another volunteer from our neighborhood to help out with the committee. The other thing that you mentioned is the survey. The Tacoma Park Community Action Group, group that I'm on, that has members are from the Maple Avenue, Lee Avenue neighborhood, recently did a survey, and we have some experience in trying to get responses to the survey, and found it very difficult if you just cold mail out the surveys, or if you hand somebody a survey and say, be sure to give me the results back. We get virtually no results back in that way. It really takes a face-to-face, please do it now, fill in the survey before we get responses. And I would say we're far less than 1% of responses that have come in voluntarily. Most of them require, people are agreeable to do it. You have the volunteer that has the time to stand there and say, please do it now, and I'll wait for the answers. I just give you that for whatever it's worth. You have someone on your committee that is familiar with surveys, and maybe they have a way of getting people to fill them in, but we sure haven't. You say you amount-wise, you don't have a feel at this point for what that would cost.
No, don't have a feel for what it would cost, but that was strictly because we really weren't sure exactly how many households that we might be sending to. We also just sort of in response to what you were saying about the difficulty of actually administering and getting a decent response rate. Our thought is to do a multimodal survey, both online and hard copy. So we'll be getting responses in two different ways. The online survey, we were hoping that the different council members would be willing to send letters to the neighborhood associations in their respective wards, and then encourage the presidents of those neighborhood associations to send out, the letter from the council member to everybody. Obviously, not everyone has access to the internet. Obviously, not everyone even reads their neighborhood association, email simply because they get so much of it or what have you. But if we use more than one method, we're hoping that we'll be able to cover, enough ground to get a decent response rate for the survey.
Okay, I wish you well with that. We've had real trouble in that. And of course, our neighborhood here along the Maple and Lee Avenue has, many of the residents don't have computer access, so it makes it difficult. And although we do provide for free access here at the library, it's just another hurdle that has to be jumped to get the responses to your survey. The Tacoma Park Community Action Group was also talking with the group that was there at Impact Silver Spring about possibly publishing another edition of the Community Action Group's magazine to help disseminate information to people about how to work through the healthcare system today and get the access to the existing resources. The group would maybe be interested in talking with you also about how they can help to get the survey out. Now, we did our survey in the form of a magazine, and we're able to pay with that through advertising and also some outside money from the Tacoma Foundation. But certainly be interested in talking to you about how we can help with that. Thank you.
We were also under the impression that the county was forming a committee on access to health care and that someone from our committee would be invited to join. We don't know if the county has indeed formed this committee, and we weren't invited, or it hasn't been formed yet, but that's something that we just don't know about. I asked Councilmember Austin Lane about it, and she wasn't sure either, and thought that former Councilman Elridge might know about it.
It would be worth following up. My impression is that nothing has happened with it. In fact, it's something that sort of got lost in between administrations. And I think it's still a good idea, and someone like Mark or, other members of the council, we could probably talk to them about our continued interest in that.
I did have one other FYI that unfortunately I don't have a lot of information here because I literally had an hour-long meeting with Jerry Stocks yesterday and haven't had a chance to, Google this company, frankly, because so I know only a little bit about it, but I just thought the council would be interested in learning that WA has retained an organization called Dynamis, which was described to me as...
Anita, if your papers get on the microphone, that sound of distant thunder is what happens.
An organization called Dynamis, which I know nothing about, but was described to me as an organization that specializes in assisting hospitals that are undergoing reorganizations and having difficulties with the communities or tense relations with the communities in which they're currently located. And Dynamis has asked to interview Lois and me, and I would not be surprised if they come, calling to speak with one or all of you. But it was interesting for me to learn that, and I just thought I would pass it along as an FYI.
Okay.
First, I want to say that I support your request for money for the survey and other needs. I think committees need to have some kind of small budget, as we've done in the past. And obviously, you need to come up with a proposed budget before we could discuss it. I also think, as was said earlier, I think the idea of looking into how we might provide coverage for folks through some kind of group policy or other means is a really good idea also for the committee. And finally, I just want to support your looking into or broadening the scope of the committee to look into the provision of health care, both the provision side as well as the access and cost side. These are issues that would help the council in moving forward on a lot of things. So I really support that as well.
Okay.
I second what Ruben was saying. I think that in my experience, the the committees that are most active are the ones that do have a certain amount of budget, 2,500, 5,000, it's somewhere in that range. So I hope you will come back to the city manager, the council, whatever is needed for your work. I think the survey is a very good idea. What you all are doing a great job of is doing that needs assessment that really gives you a touchstone as you're proceeding with making recommendations to the community in which you want them to apply. So the survey does seem like a good idea, and given that the city's survey is already fairly extensive, doing an individual survey just for this purpose makes sense to me. I think that's, I had one other point to make, but I'll come back to it.
Yeah, I just had 2 quick thoughts on the ways to get you the tools and the assets that you need to get more information. My thought had been that we ought to be able to come up with an authorization for, say, $500 for covering some meeting spaces to get out into the community more, and maybe in getting some help with the council members, as you suggest, to find out the better ways to get into some of those places might alleviate some of the need for that. And the thought I had on the survey, I know it's got its downsides, but putting an insert into the city newsletter could at least get something out there fairly quickly. I know that you're more likely to get better response from the single-family homeowners because the survey, the newsletter tends to get delivered there more easily. I know getting into particularly the larger apartment buildings can be difficult because I guess maybe a stack goes in. I guess they do get mailed to the post office box.
They're supposed to be.
Supposed to be, but I know there are difficulties in making sure that gets to people in larger apartment buildings. But that at least would be a way to get the survey out fairly quickly with minimal cost, because as an insert, I think that can be done. So that a small amount for getting into some locations around the city and into the city newsletter could be done fairly quickly with a fairly minimal expense.
One thing I'll say, since it does appear that we're brainstorming up here about survey methods, is the Old Tacoma Business Association did one by just email announcement and then online survey, and it was wildly successful. The only thing I don't know is whether people were voting multiple times, just so that their point of view would be weighted more heavily, but that was the only drawback I saw in the way that they were approaching it. The thing that I wanted to get back to was about working with Washington Adventist Hospital, and I think the expanded mission that you see for the committee really does fit with what I was hoping the committee would take on. So I certainly affirm the direction you're wanting to go in, that you are going in. I would think with Dynamis and with Jerry Stocks that there should be some very good discussion between committee members and the hospital about what you've learned, and if there can be brainstorming about alternatives to their proposed move, then that's certainly what I'd like to see happen. And then as the hospital maybe reformulates their plans, or as you have suggestions for things that the city council could pursue in an official capacity, I'd really like to hear back from you about that. But in some ways, it could be a door opening with the Dynamis contract being a means by which the hospital wants to make sure that they're in sync with this community, or maybe some other community where they are thinking about moving, but we can, frame it as a positive thing.
And we haven't let our original mission of what is the impact of WA leaving Tacoma Park on the community, but until there's any finalized plan from them, it's hard to say what the impact will be because there are so many different possible scenarios for them in terms of freestanding clinics if they want to leave, urgent care, ER, where they're going to be, what's going to happen now with respect to PG hospitals' potential closing, and so it's hard for us to come up with a proposed suggestion of what happens when they leave when we don't know where they're going or when they're going or what they're doing. And it's been a little bit hard for us to kind of keep up with their different gyrations because they don't tell us everything. But,
Two other points. One is that the Long Branch area was where they had acquired property and designed a building and proposed it, and then a couple of weeks ago I heard from them directly that they were no longer pursuing urgent care there. Well, that was a big surprise to me, but it really does lend itself to the interpretation that there are a lot of possibilities on the table. So I think this is a great chance for this committee to see what those possibilities might be, and then definitely draw on city resources to get the work done that you think is necessary next steps, and then also draw on county resources. I know Councilmember Elrich has been active in challenging the hospital's assertions about needing to move or about needing to consolidate everything all in one enormous campus. He was in the news a week ago about other ideas, and so I think this is an important time. I don't think we have much time to lose, and I hope that we're in a good position to hopefully influence the outcome. The last thing that I'll say is Senator Raskin put together a healthcare task force, I think he called it, before the state session formed, and then once it did, there were lots of bills and healthcare reform discussions. One thing I was involved in helping him do was put together a forum where he briefed new legislators on healthcare issues and reform possibilities. I think that happened in November, and it was at Montgomery College. Now that the state session is over, I think this is a great time to draw on him as a resource, maybe see if his task force members can serve on your committee, and there's great expertise there. So I think I can't remember if the Health Services Impact Committee only allowed, it's probably right here in this resolution, whether it allowed people from other, outside the city limits. But I think that in this case, that's another opportunity for us to look beyond our borders. Probably not DC, because that's not where that's not how things work. They don't cross that line. But Prince George's, Silver Spring, those are Long Branch. Those are definitely communities that were heavily impacted by any move the hospital might make. So if there are people that that you know of who could be who could serve on this committee, I would be open to considering them as applicants and getting them involved. I think that would be a very good direction to go in. So that's it.
I think where we are at this point is if you can get us a list of your active members, the council, we can actually put out an advertisement for additional members, and maybe the council can try and help recruit people for the places that you're missing people from. If you can give us a better sense of how much money you would need for a survey, we can take a look at that as we take a look at the budget. And I don't think it would be a problem to give you a small budget for, room rentals or whatever. And the other thing is, I would be happy, and I'm sure there'd be other members of the council who'd be happy to sit down with you for like a working meeting to, if you wanted to think through some of these other things. I think I'd be more than happy to do that, and as I said, I think there'd be other members of the council who would be willing to do that also.
That would be great. Some of the things that you just mentioned, we've already done. For instance, we've identified people that would be terrific to recruit, but we're fairly confident that we'd be more likely to get their participation if they were approached by you, Mayor, or a council member than if we approached them.
Go ahead and send us their names, too.
Okay.
Because I think many council members have been very good at getting people to agree to serve on committees, yes. So that's probably something else that we could do also.
I met someone in the post office, first time. He recognized me, I didn't know him, and I got his name and number, and hopefully for a while he served on your committee, but I don't know if that's the case anymore. So we are recruiting at all possible times.
I just also wanted to thank Councilmember Austin Lane and Councilmember Snipper for coming and attending for a good deal of time our first two outreach meetings. It's really important, I think, to other members of the community when they see folks from the council or the mayor, at the meetings and participating. And so I would encourage people to continue to come out to these community meetings. I really think it makes a difference.
Okay, good. Well, definitely keep us informed, and if there's other things that we could do to help, let us know. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we appreciate all the time and effort that you're putting in. The next item is a discussion of a proposed pilot for 8508 Flower Avenue.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to open up this discussion regarding a proposed pilot agreement for 8508, 8510 Flower Avenue, which is a 21-unit rental property which was purchased by Montgomery Housing Partnership on April 4th. I'm pleased to say that this came about because the tenants exercised their right to purchase under the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase law, and then assigned their right to Montgomery Housing Partnership. So here tonight is David Wilson and Steve Sprecher from Montgomery Housing Partnership, and they're here to answer any questions that you may have about the proposal. MHP is requesting a 10-year pilot agreement with 100% abatement of local property taxes for the first 5 years, 75% abatement for the next 3 years, and 50% abatement for the last 2 years. The county has already agreed to a full abatement of county property taxes for as long as Montgomery Housing Partnership owns the property. And the estimated fiscal impact is shown on your cover sheet. So with this, I'll turn it over to Steve.
Good evening, Mayor Porter, council persons. I'm Steve Sprecher. I'm Director of Real Estate Neighborhood Development at MHP. And this is the second time I've been before you to request a pilot. We received a pilot on our 3 Tacoma Park properties, and we were successful in obtaining 9% tax credits at the last CDA round. Those properties are going to be starting construction in September, and we're very, very pleased. And I wanted to thank you again for your support of those projects. I'm here today to request a pilot for 8508 Flower. This is a property that over the last few years has been flipped back and forth between various landlords. Somebody will take it, keep it for a couple of years, do the minimum rehab, and then flip it to somebody else for a profit. In 2005, there were, I believe, 168 code violations. In 2006, there were 182 code violations. There's still some uncorrected items, which we are fixing very shortly, such as no dedicated AC circuits and the old steel casement windows, which are original to the building, which was built in 1953, as is the boiler, which is original. When we first got involved with this property, the property owner had a contract of sale with a third party who was going to do the same thing. He was apparently going to just hold it for a couple of years, do the minimum rehab, and then flip it. We got involved when the tenants requested us to get involved, and we're successful in getting a contract signed with the owner. It took a long time. He threatened the tenants association, saying it was an illegal contract, and threatened litigation, essentially. It was tied up for many, many months, but we were finally able to close on April 4th. And I would have to say I've been involved in real estate development for a long time, and have seen a lot of properties, but this one was probably one of the worst I've ever seen. There were holes in walls. The casement windows let in all kinds of air. There are still roach infestations, mice infestations, broken windows, very bad holes in the roof. We're breaking the cycle of these properties being flipped. And it's a key building because it's located about one block from 8626 Flower, half a block from Greenwood Terrace, and then another block or so from 641 Houston, properties that we all control. And it's right there in the middle. Pretty obvious. It's the only building on the street with the casement windows and perennial junk in the parking lot. So, we are anticipating applying again for 9% tax credits for this project, along with the Edinburgh project, which Councilman Siemens is intimately aware of, and another project in the September round. But we need all the financial help we can get, including this pilot. It's a really important piece to keep the rents as low as possible while doing the amount of rehab we want to do. Already, the county has given us a $2,300,000 loan for the project in soft funds, which it paid for the acquisition, is going to pay for part of the rehab. So we're attracting other investment in Tacoma Park, and but need your help to complete that. Also, for the tax credit application, they do require local support and involvement. So,
What would your plans be in terms of maintaining rents at affordable levels?
well, what we intend to do is apply for the tax credits, which would provide probably about 55% of the total development costs. And with the county funding, the county loan will be a 10-year, well, the first 10 years will be no payments at all, and then from years 11 through 40 will be 50% of cash flow. So having all of this soft money, essentially grants up front, we're able to do a really great level of rehab, and we intend to do kitchens, bathrooms, new windows, new roofs, a completely new HVAC system. That's expensive. We estimated it for this property, because this one's in worse shape than most of our properties that we've acquired, at about, I think it's about $50,000 a unit. And that doesn't include the immediate code violations, and that's going to be about $105,000. So by having all of this soft financing in and the reduction in operating expenses by the pilot, we'll be able to keep rents affordable, probably close to the levels that they are right now.
Is part of your agreement with us some specifics in terms of rent levels?
Yes, we've actually covenanted with the county for.
I think the problem when you put your papers on the microphone, it sort of blocks you a little bit. So we'll just pull it out of your way there a little bit. Thanks.
I heard that before, and I forgot it once I was up here. We've committed to various levels of, I think it's 2 units at 30% of AMI, 3 units at 40% of AMI, 14 units at 60% of AMI, and then 2 unrestricted, because we always find there are a couple of people that may be over income and that would be displaced if we were to put income restrictions. Although I think in this property, I've been quite certain that, and I haven't seen incomes yet because we haven't done the certification, that everybody is below 50% of area median income. And that was one of the requirements for the county giving us the funds, the steep income
So
target.
when you're talking about setting that median income, you're talking about keeping the rents at 30% of those income levels? Is that what you're
Yes.
talking about doing?
Yes, and the maximum tenant incomes, for example, would be anywhere from $20,000 to $48,000 a year, with most of them being, I'd say, in the lower 30s. So
Yeah.
these are very affordable to those, to workforce housing, the people that we need to keep our economy going.
Yeah. Now that the council's interest, as you know, is that we want very much to preserve affordable housing in our community. And even though this costs us something in foregone property taxes, it's an investment in preserving affordable housing, essentially long-term in our community. And so that's why we're interested in doing it. And so I would be real interested when this comes back for the formal resolution or whatever it comes back with, to have very specifically what your commitment to how many units at what level, and have that all written out so that we could see that, because I would like to sort of be sure. And also my understanding from what you said is that these are essentially mandatory because they're part of a written agreement you have with the county for their abatements, which are 100% abatements. Is that right? And so in effect, the agreement with the county would exist as long as you were receiving the county abatements. It's for a 10-year period right now, but presumably at the end of the 10 years, you would go back and ask for longer term?
The county is, loan term is for 40 years, so these are for 40 years.
Okay.
And when we go and apply for the tax credits, these will be the income levels that we covenant to.
That would be very helpful to know what the income levels were and for what period of time. That would all be very useful. I appreciate getting that information. Thank you. Gary?
Thank you, Mayor Porter. Do you have a feel for the income levels of the current residents?
We really don't, Councilman Siemens, but my impression is that they are probably under 50% of area median. I would say under 40,000 a year. We don't have any information.
That's a lot of ground to cover, though, between 0 and 40.
Yeah.
I'm really trying to get a feel for how many of these people will be displaced.
I don't know, because we don't have income levels.
Right. I think that would be important to know, too.
Okay. We will try to get income levels of the tenants, the current tenants. But as we are finding with our Tacoma Park properties, the other 3 properties, people are very resistant to give out personal information. They're going to have to eventually, but we are actually having tenants threatening to sue us because they're saying this is an invasion of privacy and that you're going to take my Social Security number and sell it on the street and things like that. But I will try to find that information.
Do
we have that? We didn't get that.
And I would just like to thank you for some of the recent upgrades that you've made to the Edinburgh, since you brought that up.
You haven't seen anything yet. We are planning on relining all the pipes in the building, probably starting next month. There's been a huge problem with acidic water in that area, and all the pipes are leaking, so we're going to be relining the pipes with an epoxy, and then applying for 9% tax credits with this project in September, doing a full rehab of that property. So
fantastic.
We intend to do a lot more with it.
I know
we're here to stay in Tacoma Park, and we want to make sure our properties are places that tenants can be proud to live in.
The residents will be glad to hear that.
Yeah, I know they will be.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we very much appreciate the partnership so far. And I think it's been a good partnership, and I am looking forward to continuing it. Ruben?
Yes, I just want to second the comments of Councilmember Siemens and the other council members concerning how happy we are to have you guys doing this. This is particularly, that is my ward, and I have passed that building for the entire time I've lived in Tacoma Park and just been appalled about it. I'm so glad that this is an opportunity to really upgrade it. And I think it will have an impact on neighboring properties as well, favorable impact on them. So I'm really, really glad about this. I didn't see it in here, perhaps it is, and I missed it. Do you have kind of a timing, how long this sort of renovation would take, and how long people would be have to be out of the units, or would they have to be out of the units? Are you going to do renovation in place, or can you just speak to that a bit?
Well, we intend to apply for the financing in September. If awarded, we would get the credits in November, probably start construction the summer of 2008. It takes a long time to get the plans and specs and the contracts bid out. Tenants would probably be relocated to another building in the area. It would not be rehab in place. This property needs complete rehab. You can't do it while tenants are living there. But probably, I would say, 6 weeks. They would be living off-site, either at another property or somewhere else where we could locate them.
Yes, I think this is an excellent program, and I wanted to, just for my own background and edification, I mean, you folks in partnerships like these seem to be renovators of last resort when, market failures have made it impossible for lower income people to remain within the Beltway in order to serve the market, the labor market that needs them, and it also seems to be the case when landlords or circumstances have run these properties, almost into the ground. There is a place of last resort to turn them into livable spaces again. And my question is, what's the limit of your acquisition capability?
Staff and money. That is the limit. As Dave knows, we are very, very busy. We're working on an RFP for another property right off of Maple Avenue. So I'd say my staff's time and energy, and I will have to say that I have a very dedicated staff, and we're very proud of them, but that's a lot of what it is.
And the marketplace itself, do you detect a trend here where not only will the need, of course, seemingly always exceed, or the demand will always exceed the supply of these places, but certainly, there in your forward-looking plans, is there a number of? Do you have a number of properties that you would be able to? Because
our goal over the next few years is to acquire strategic plan 2004 to 2010. We plan to acquire 500 to 1,000 units over the next few years.
Within the county as a
Within
whole?
the county, yes.
500.
We're limited by our charter to Montgomery County, so and
Yes.
we've been focusing a lot in Tacoma Park.
Yeah, I wonder how many Tacoma Park, how busy we'll keep you. It seems so far we've done pretty well.
Well, if you can convince Karen Fishman to sell her property to us, I'd appreciate that. We've been trying to for.
She's willing to sell it. It's just a matter of price.
Yeah. We have to make the numbers work.
Okay, thanks.
Mayor Porter, if I may just ask one more question. Since you opened the door, is there anything that you need from this council to help with the building on Maple Avenue down by Sligo Creek?
The Maple Hilltop property. Actually, we met with staff last week, Linda and Alana and Sarah, and talked about some of our plans. So they helped us out a lot, and we're very supportive in the plans that we intend to submit. Our proposal is to build some additional rental units on the property and to keep the property affordable, maybe even lower rents, and do the rehab that the tenants want as an alternative to them buying it as condominium units and taking them off the rental market forever. we're still going to put in an RFP for that, but we're trying to be a little bit more creative. Staff has been very helpful in that respect.
Where is this property?
It's 7716 and 7720 Maple Avenue, right at Sligo.
It's the buildings that the hospital own. And then, since you brought up the building there that Ms. Fishman owns, if there's anything I can do to help you with that, please let me know. That is in our neighborhood and has been vacant for some time, and we would like to see it become viable again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, as I said, we appreciate the partnership we've had with you on a number of these buildings in the past, and we have quite a supply of affordable rental housing still available in Tacoma Park, and so if you are looking for additional properties to sell, I would imagine that some of them will continue to come on the market just as these things evolve, and we very much do appreciate the work that you've done in rehabilitating them and maintaining them as long-term affordable units. So I hope we can continue to work together on these things. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'll get that information to you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. The next item is a discussion of our proposed residence survey.
I'll just make some introductory comments and then turn it over to Vanita. Just some history. I think most of the council is aware of this, but shortly before I joined the city in June of '04, council approved a contract with the National Research Center to do a resident survey for a price not to exceed $30,000. The general purpose of the survey was to kind of gauge community perceptions, their feelings about the level of customer service that the city provided, and with a specific emphasis also on where residents get information from and about community-oriented policing services. Since that time, the city has become has an accredited police agency under CALEA, and there are some specific questions that are required in accordance with the city's accredited status. What we have before you this evening is a draft of about a 5.5-page survey, I guess. And we would like to basically get your thoughts and comments. This is something that has been circulated among the staff members. The survey would be printed in English and in Spanish. So what we're looking for this evening is some specific thoughts that you have about what we have in the agenda packet. An additional item is whether or not the council has any interest in including any questions in the survey about the proposed construction of a gym. We did include in the packet, and these are basically drafted by staff, not by the survey company, just our thoughts about the type of questions that perhaps could be asked. Obviously, we'd look to the survey company who actually has expertise in how you word questions. But I think the issue that we really need some direction on this evening is if you even want to include any questions in the survey about a gym construction. With that, Vanita has been the staff person who's actually been working with the various departments. I don't know if she has any comments she'd like to make, or at this juncture she may just be looking for some feedback from the council in terms of what's included so far in the draft.
I had a couple. I'd like to maybe do this in two parts. One is to first deal with the survey as it exists, and then talk about the possibility of adding some gym questions on it. I remember that we were briefed by this company, but it was some time ago, and I don't remember exactly what they told us. So I apologize if I ask you to repeat some of that information.
But that's okay, Mayor. Probably it's the first time I've heard the question, so it's okay.
I forget, it seems to me that they had sort of a basic questionnaire that they started from. And I guess in looking at the questions, they looked like reasonable questions, but I had a couple of kinds of questions. One was, how were the questions developed? Did they start with sort of a basic form and then add in specific things for Tacoma Park? And did they pre-test any of these specific questions? That's one group of questions. And the other group of concerns, I guess they would be, follows on to some points that Councilmember Siemens made earlier about the issue of the healthcare survey. We know from the survey that he's working on, from other things, that reaching low-income families in our community, particularly tenants, is a real challenge. And I'm not at all convinced that we can just mail them a survey or even mail them a survey twice and expect we're going to get any kind of a reasonable response rate. And so I would be interested in some detailed explanation of how they would plan to reach particularly low-income tenants. And printing the surveys in Spanish is an excellent idea, but there are other languages that would those residents be left out? And even for the people who read English or Spanish, how would you convince them, people who are working very long hours and have many things to do, that they should spend the time to fill out the survey?
Well, I guess, ma'am, we'll start. I'm going to refer to Barbara also in dealing with a couple of your concerns relating to dealing with reaching the low-income tenants and the sampling population. But the initial survey, what we received, I've been talking with the staff at the National Research Center, and they have been, this company has also prepared the citizen surveys for Rockville as well. We looked at their sample, and staff received copies, and they compared some of the services that were done in the city of Rockville as to the services provided in the city of Tacoma Park. Staff has spent a lot of time breaking down this survey, looking at it, comparing it to other surveys to make sure we address the citizens' concerns or the services that are provided in the city of Tacoma Park. We've also communicated with the staff to make sure that the questions were phrased properly, and these questions that you have here are based on the staff of the National Research Center's recommendation. We formulated the questions. We've just had several discussions. We've made several changes. There have been several drafts on this with this survey. The goal here is to try to we're not only going to have it in Spanish, but we also have a paragraph where we allow, which will be stated in different languages, telling the person that they are able to get assistance from someone who understands English in various languages. For example, we have the various languages that we have listed here. Besides Spanish, there will be a paragraph indicating that that individual, for example, if they speak Asian, they will be able to talk to someone that could explain to them in English and in their language what the survey is actually saying.
And would help them fill it out?
And would help them fill it out.
The two languages that we have spoken to, and obviously it varies from community to community. I think the council certainly is aware of this. There's a number of languages spoken in Tacoma Park, and it's difficult to probably encompass all of those. The two languages that I think we've identified and would probably recommend as a staff would probably be Amharic and French. That besides Spanish would probably encompass the majority of our residents. Just to elaborate on what Benita stated, we would probably have, there'd be a cover letter that would basically accompany the survey. On the back of that, there would basically be a paragraph, if you will, in Amharic as well as in French, basically indicating that if this is their native language and they would like some assistance in completing the survey, it would provide some contact information, and we would then work with those residents to basically assist them in getting the survey completed. If I may, I think, Benita, unless there's something you wanted to add, I think the mayor, you asked a number of questions just about the sampling. Obviously, we have a large percentage of our community is renters, and that can be difficult at times to get feedback from. And I think Councilmember Siemens very accurately pointed out the difficulties in just getting surveys completed by folks generally. The process that the National Research Center would use is basically to send a postcard, and there'd be basically 3,000 surveys sent out. A week before the survey would actually be mailed, sort of look for it in your mailbox, that type of thing. The survey would then follow about a week later. They would mail a second copy the following week. Because of the difficulties at times with getting renters to basically respond, essentially the renter component of our community would actually be oversampled, basically to increase the likelihood that the results would actually be representative of our community. There would be probably, I think the typical response rates, I was going back and looking through my notes, they would expect somewhere between 700 and 1,100 of those 3,000 surveys to come back. Obviously, we would hope there would be much more than that, but that equates to a response rate of about 23 to 33%. The city of Rockville, I believe the last survey they did, they had a response rate of about 48%.
But from their low-income population or overall?
That was overall. I don't know, Mayor, if that answered your question or not.
Well, it answered the question, but I'm not sure that that's going to get us what we need. I think we can send a postcard and 2 copies of the survey without probably making an appreciable dent in the number of people who would respond. And I think we probably are going to need to do something like what Terry's group did and actually call people on the phone or send somebody around, or this isn't something that we necessarily have to have trained survey people do. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Terry, you said that just having somebody standing there saying, could you do it right now, and I'll take it, and you don't have to put it in the mailbox, I'll take it right now. It wouldn't have to be a trained survey person. It could just be someone who was
persistent.
well, no, so maybe an intern or someone who could just, show up and say, listen, I know that you've got 600 things to do today, but if you do this right now, I can take it off your hands, and you can cross one thing off your list, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Are you suggesting, Mayor, that we go to the individual units, or that we attend the various tenant associations, community meetings, and things of that nature?
Well, I'm sort of, maybe I would ask Councilmember Siemens what his group found to be most effective.
Going unit to unit, unfortunately, is the best way.
You went unit to unit?
Yeah, although we did get a good response by locating in some areas, like you said, association meetings, but even in front of the stores, and stopping people as they come in and out of the stores.
Yeah, I would just mention, this is obviously, it's not sent to everyone, it is sent to 3,000 specific people to make sure that it is statistically valid from a geographical standpoint, from gender, so that might make it difficult to do. The other thing I would just note is, obviously, so that we can basically analyze some of the data, and it's certainly discretionary, but we do ask that those filling out the survey provide some demographic information, and I think it is possible that there may be some individuals who might be more comfortable sending that to an anonymous survey company in the state of Colorado, as opposed to handing that to someone who can identify that very private information with them specifically.
Well, they will put it in an envelope in order to send it, and they could put it in an envelope and seal it up and then hand it to people who could.
I think a lot of that would depend on the individual's comfort level with whether or not that's just going to be dropped in the mail or where it's going to go. I'm just saying that could lead to some privacy concerns on the part of some individuals.
And we had the same concern, and so we left that demographic information out of our survey for that very reason.
I think what it could point out is whether or not there are different perceptions of the city based on income levels, geography, and it may help the city in some instances. For instance, if there's a gap between how folks in a certain ward get information versus another ward, the information will be essentially identified by ward. So I wouldn't suggest eliminating everything, as it may have some meaning in terms of what actions the city takes in response to the survey data we get back.
Again, Council, I would like to stress that this survey that you have before you is a survey that's being supported by the staff of the National Research Inc. and this company has a history of being able to provide good surveys and providing us with good analysis that can benefit the city in the long run. And a lot of this information that is provided here, although it's geared towards Takoma Park, will also give us some idea of what type of programs and services we'll need in the future. The various age groups, various age cohorts that we'll have to deal with, the concerns of the different economical groups that are within the city of Takoma Park.
I agree with you about the importance of the survey, and that's why I would like to make sure that we don't end up with relatively few responses from some of our neediest households. But I won't beat this thing to death anymore, Terry.
Thank you, Mayor. At this point, I would just like to say that I have very little experience with surveys, and this company has a lot of experience with surveys. So I'm willing to defer to their judgment on things. but I think it's important that we know that we do have survey results that reflect the replies of our a cross-section of our community, including the lowest income residents of the city. The only change that I see that the information that I think would be helpful is to know kind of the neighborhood where the response is coming from. And the reason I say that is, you know, like under the police services, it talks about, actually, I guess it's in the first section, quality of community. It talks about how safe do you feel in your neighborhood during the day. And then it talks about some of our commercial districts. But I think there's a wide difference in how people feel in different neighborhoods in our city. And so I think it would be helpful if there's some way to identify the neighborhoods without identifying the address.
If I may, Councilmember Siemens, is it helpful from your perspective if that, since each individual survey respondent will be tied to a ward, is that too broad from your perspective, or do you want to try to see if there's a way to say narrow it down to a particular neighborhood in Ward 4, Ward 6, whatever?
Yeah, I don't know that that ward means anything to anybody but council members, so
No,
I'm not
actually,
sure that would be a good question to ask.
I think if we were to try to do it by ward, I think we would probably need to have some type of map to help people basically be sure that they know which ward they're actually residing in. I think there's some folks who do know that and others who probably do not, would be my guess.
So if we're going to have a map, maybe there's some other logic that could be used instead of ward that would, you know, I think within Ward 4 there's, you know, the single family area, and then there's the apartment district. And they have maybe different opinions.
I would agree with that, and also that the analysis, or one way to look at the data would be to try to understand how the opinions differ by geographical area. One way to do it, of course, would be to ask them to identify the name of the street they live on, which would not give away their actual address, but it would give us a sense of where, and we could match the street to the area. Another would be the map, where you just ask them to circle the general area in which they live. It's a long survey, and unfortunately I have a couple of other things maybe to add to it. One would be on the first page under number 4 would be litter. There's none of the other issues specifically address that. And another might be in the, you know, beginning matter, try to tell the survey or the person filling out the survey how much time in general it would take them, so they don't look at this and their eyes immediately glaze over and think they're going to be here for the next 3 weeks filling it out. And then another area of possible inquiry would be, well, for lack of a better phrase now, I would call it maybe shopping or retail options, in which, you know, we might have them say, in the best of all possible worlds, you know, what kinds of things, where would you like to shop, or what kind of shopping, I don't know, and give them 6 or 7 restaurants, or I don't know, but maybe think a little bit about.
Councilmember, were you looking at any particular section?
No, this would be a new area, a new category.
Councilmember Berry, if I may, are you interested in finding out where the survey respondent shops, or what type of services would be desirable in the community?
Desirable part, rather than where they shop now. Or you could even ask both. Have you shopped, have you made a purchase at a Tacoma Park business over the last, I don't know, 48 hours a week? And then another category could ask, what kinds of retail choices would you like to see in the city?
We actually, in the various drafts that have been circulated among the staff members at one point, tried to maybe get at where people shopped or in what business district. And then when we stepped back, and obviously looking at the length of it, stepped back and thought, well, that might not tell us much. Each of the survey options does include 2 open-ended questions, and in looking through the responses that Rockville received, I think some of the more interesting data, even if it's more kind of anecdotal, was coming from those open-ended questions. One of the things, if you're interested from an economic development standpoint, perhaps of finding out why, where people are going or why they're leaving the city to purchase something or to access a particular service, we could certainly talk amongst ourselves and talk to the survey company about whether or not that might be an appropriate open-ended question.
Yes, I'd certainly encourage you to do that. And then you raised an interesting point, Barb, and that is, to your knowledge, what are some of the other municipalities that have done surveys learning from their surveys that have been done in terms of actionable, sort of policy directions?
I think it depends on kind of what your focus is. Rockville survey, from what I recall, and Vanita can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe most of their survey was really geared towards kind of general customer service, satisfaction type of questions. In my experience, the surveys that the communities that I've worked in have done have all been very targeted to basically get to a specific issue or topic. Some of those have been related to specific bond issue topics, because the state that I worked in basically required voter approval for bond projects, and so you were trying to get a sense of whether or not people would support a bond issue, at what level. We did a survey for basically a major building project in the community park renovations, trying to get a sense of what people supported and what they didn't. We did not use mail surveys, we used phone surveys and did focus groups. So I have more familiarity with more targeted type of surveys or feedback mechanisms than kind of a general perception survey.
And this seems like a combination of both quality of life matters as well as customer service. Is it overly broad in that sense? Would the staff recommend perhaps eliminating some of these things to make it a bit more easy to fill out and focused?
I don't, we haven't really had that discussion. We've actually tried to go through and sort of pare it down and look at the various service areas that were part of our organization in terms of what might be helpful. We did kind of step back and say, okay, what would we do with the information? And if there was a sense that we wouldn't do anything with it, or if it was overly cumbersome, and one of the things we talked about a lot was trying to get feedback on our parks. And then what we kind of backed ourselves into is, by the time you get through which parks are city parks and which parks are park and planning, and you had to have a 2-paragraph explanation of which one was which, we ended up eliminating all of that. I do think it's important that we hear back from our residents on what they think about what we're doing well on, what we're not doing so great on. And I know that Ms. Moffett, our communications director, felt very strongly that she would like to get a sense of where people are getting information from, because that would help us, regardless of what our issue is or what we're trying to communicate, to find out where residents are actually hearing about city programs and activities, and perhaps we could have a more targeted message. I don't think at this juncture, Councilmember Berry, we could certainly pare it down, because obviously there's cost implications with whether you have a 5-page survey, a 6-page survey, or a 7-page survey. But I don't think there was anything that jumped out at me as we've been working through this process as a staff that basically begged to be eliminated. Otherwise, I think we would have already done that before we presented it to you this evening.
Yeah, just a couple comments. One, a general comment is, I think we need to leave all the demographic information in the survey. Otherwise, we could get results and we still don't know whether we've got information back from the populations that we're concerned about getting information back from. So if we don't have the demographic information, we'll never know. I've got a couple comments about the draft survey here in particular. On question number 3, I think there's one thing that's missing from this that I think is absolutely vital to be there, And I think we need to, it's why do you choose to live in Tacoma Park? And the thing that I don't see there is people moved here for affordable housing. I think we really need to know that. I had some other thoughts on some other sections, and I can provide staff with my copies so that you don't have to madly write them down, but just that they're not, I think the affordable housing in number 3 is crucial. The other ones maybe aren't so crucial, but in question 4, adding pedestrian safety, disruptive neighbors like noise or illegal activities, inadequate public infrastructure, and Doug's litter, I had that one as well. On question 6, attended a meeting at this building. Question 14, something getting at the usability of action.
That was in the survey.
Yeah, if I may, that was originally, I think, in the first draft. One of the things I had sent out to the council, and actually I was supposed to remind you of this anyway, so thank you, Councilmember Williams, for the segue. About a month or so ago, I had sent out a link to another kind of customer service inquiry system, because there have been ongoing concerns about the functionality and user-friendliness of Action. At this point, we're not really thinking about continuing Action. We're looking at some other alternatives. Therefore, there didn't seem to be much of a point of asking about it if it's a system that we're not planning to continue.
Then I wonder if the question couldn't be rating the city service of providing a feedback mechanism or a way of registering complaints, complaint processes, some general way without tying it to a particular software to get at, and that way we might get a feeling for whether people, whether people have experience, whether it's don't know or it's like, gee, I've tried to use something, or yes, it's important. It might guide where we go. Anything else? The only other thought I had was on the last section on if we include something on a gym. The thought that I had was that if we ask the questions that are here about yes, but borrow certain amounts, it only has 4, 5, and 6 million, and if we go there, I would add 1, 2, and 3 just because even if we think it's going to be some other number, I think you can't just ask those higher numbers.
If we're going to the gym part, let me start
Mayor Porter,
on that.
Before we go to the gym, may I ask
Yes.
just a couple questions or make a couple comments? One is on question number 12 under police services. I wondered if D, sensitive to citizens' concerns, might be residents might be better.
We tried to catch all that, and apparently we missed one. I apologize.
Okay. And then I really appreciate your comment earlier about open-ended questions. We found in the survey in the Community Action Group that we provided an opportunity for comments in each of the sections, and we got some of our most valuable answers in those comment sections, and I don't see so many of those in here. I think it would be valuable, although it's a little more difficult to analyze. It's valuable information that people are willing to volunteer, and they answer questions that we don't think to ask. And then the only other comment I'll make, and it's just one word, and I'm sure that you have struggled with it, and that's length. Length.
All we've done is make suggestions for addition.
Yeah.
So are you saying?
I don't have an answer. I know that you've struggled with it, the length of the survey, and this is, it's long. Yeah. But I, again, defer to the experts on whether they think they can get it filled, people respond to it.
Well, I must say, Councilmember, we did have a survey much longer than that. Staff had a lot of suggestions. We addressed a lot of the issues that you all have mentioned already. And we worked on minimizing this survey so that, one, it wouldn't be so long. And we were also at the advice of the staff at the research center. And so we will take your recommendations and include them and adjust it, because we have managed to get it down to 5.5 pages, so perhaps we can keep it at 6 pages, actually.
Well, let me go back to the gym issue, because I think it would be very useful to add a section on the gym. This is going to be one of the best opportunities we have to get a cross-section of the community's input into this. But I think it's very important that the questions, and I think just like every other part of the survey, we have to pare them down to sort of the things that are most critical to the council in looking at this issue. And I think that the questions on the gym have to be oriented to the kinds of decisions the council has in front of it. So I'm not sure that it is as useful for us to know whether people think the gym is a good thing or not. I mean, as I've talked to people, as we've all talked to people, it appears that the critical issue is sort of the balance between how much is provided and what it costs. And so I think really getting at that issue is going to be much more critical than asking people. I mean, I don't want to get into the situation that we sometimes get into, for example, at budget public hearings, where people they think city services are good and they want more of them, but they think taxes are bad and they want less of them. That kind of information put together doesn't help us make decisions very well. So I think what we have to do is figure out, and what I came up with was something like figuring out options for people. I mean, obviously, not building a gym is an option. Building a very minimal gym at a lesser cost is an option. Building a more fully equipped gym at a larger cost is an option. And of course, you know, how you fill these out, what you define those as, of course, is going to be critical. But then including in each of the questions, and I don't think it has to be 3 paragraphs for each one. I think you could do it in a paragraph or less, sort of trying to capture what would be included, what the pros and cons would be. So, for example, if you were doing no gym, you would say, you know, obviously this would require no additional cost to the city, but it would prevent us from doing these programs that we might otherwise be able to do. And it might also say, have a sentence in there about the city having difficulty finding other venues with the schools or whatever. And then maybe for the middle one, say something like, you know, there might be some drawbacks to having a limited facility, and these what some of the drawbacks would be. On the other hand, it might give us these opportunities. And for the bigger one, say this might give us many, many opportunities, but the cost would be more extensive, and it would require more time and whatever else. So rather than saying to people, because what wouldn't be useful is to say everybody thinks a gym is a good idea, but they don't think we can afford it, or they don't want to dedicate city funds to that purpose, because then I don't know what you do with that information. And I think sort of linking the things so that if you link no cost to no facility, and small cost to small facility, and big cost to big facility, and sort of ask people to, and I'm not sure that this, like the other things, is a check-off. I think you would ask people about those 3 options, ask them to indicate their preference, and then maybe leave some lines for some reaction. Because that would give us a way to sort of, because the council is going to be faced with having to sort of tease out these preferences and these thoughts and these trade-offs, and I think really getting people to think about them in that way would be most useful. Terry?
I like some of the suggestions that you've made. I wonder if this is the right survey to do it in, given the length that we already have, because I think there are several other questions that might be interesting to ask in a section about gymnasiums, more detailed questions about what people find of value in a gymnasium, a weight room, workout room, bleachers, and all those things, and I just wonder if maybe the survey itself is really more about city services, measuring the city services, and I know it would be valuable.
Definitely be a city service.
Yes, it would be. I don't know. I'm just worried that we're getting too much in there. I think I want to know the information. I'm hesitant to add more to the existing survey, the amount of information that we need to add.
If we don't do it with this, I don't know when we would do it. That's the other thing, and I'm not sure I want to spend another, I mean, there's an economy of scale issue here. I think if we went out with a whole separate survey on the gym, we'd end up, it wouldn't cost a whole lot less than this survey. And so we would essentially be paying double, and you don't pay double if you add, you know, just another half page. And I think you make some good points, and, you know, that probably could be handled by saying, you could put that in as another question, you know, say which things are most important to you, and the way they usually do it is they say, you know, here's 10 things, rank them from 1 to 10. Yeah.
I agree thoroughly with the mayor's suggestion to, I think it's a simplification, frankly, because the basic question would be more like what shows up on a ballot. You know, you have a title and then a short description of the option, and people are voting sort of yes or no for it. And I think it would help the council a lot. I didn't think that this material here was going to address, as Mayor Porter suggests, the actual question we're going to be confronted with about building or not. How people interpret a question, do you think the gym is needed, is going to differ by what people understand that to mean, and we won't know that when we get the number of yeses and nos out of it. So I actually like the idea, and the whole issue of financing is very hard to explain coherently in a survey kind of setting, so people really understand it without having follow-up questions, which they of course won't be able to answer. So I like the you know, none, small, large, or however Mayor Porter put it, for a minimal, or I guess it was minimal, and then
Various options.
Various options. Yeah, I really appreciate that, and I think a small additional set of questions, as Councilmember Siemens was suggesting, for particular facilities within that gym is a good way to go, as giving us some direction. If in fact most people favor the more extensive gym, then at least we'll have some guidance on what are the facilities they would like to see in it.
I think the council's certainly aware of this. I think one of the challenges with anything to do with the proposed construction of a gym is the complexity of the issue and how do you boil it down. Like I say, these were just sort of a first blush from staff. We have not worked with the survey company, so I certainly don't want to represent that, you know, either the best way to phrase the questions or to ask them. I think that's something we could certainly work with the survey company about. I think one of the things, if the council's direction is for us to continue looking at incorporating some questions about the gym in the survey, is to really look at how meaningful that information is, and that's what I hear you all saying. When you look back at the different options that we talked about earlier this year, the cost differential really wasn't coming from something like bleachers per se. They didn't add a lot, and I think what we probably need to define, working with the survey company once again, is what are those features that really drive cost. Because some of the items that, if you think back to the different options that we presented at the workshops, there really wasn't much difference. And I think we need to focus on those items that are really going to drive the ticket price, if you will, and try to get a sense from the survey respondents of which ones have value and which don't. I think one of the other issues that I don't think we've really talked a lot about is there's the manner in which the city would use a gym, and then there's the whole issue of community groups that might wish to have a gym. And I think part of that discussion, which once again I'm not sure if a survey is the best way to do it, but we can certainly explore it further and bring something back to the council, is if you have a lot of youth sports leagues you know, that are not affiliated with the city, what are the community's thoughts about the city's responsibility, if you will, to provide a space for those groups to actually conduct their activities in Tacoma Park versus driving to Gaithersburg, driving to Rockville. I think in talking to the recreation director, I certainly don't think she would ever has or would ever represent to this council that from a city standpoint we're going to be using a gym 24/7, and I think we do need to recognize that that is part of a value judgment that I think the community needs to make on its own. Is what the city would do, and to make sure that's clear, and to make it clear what community groups might be using, and whether that's our responsibility or not, because I think those are different issues. So if there is, like I say, a consensus, we can certainly try to come up with some better questions that I think address where the council wants to go, which is to help you in your decision-making.
I think it would be useful to try and continue to pursue this to see if we could come up with something that would be useful.
I would just want to keep the option open that when we get a valuable set of questions on the gymnasium, that we send them out as a separate survey possibly.
We can certainly explore that with the survey company and just get a sense. I think we would need to bring, especially the part of the survey dealing with the gym, back to the council anyway, so you'd have an opportunity to look at it and comment, and we can certainly, Councilmember Siemens, have some discussion with them about, you know, what the cost would be. Obviously, you are having some duplication, if you will, in terms of the mailing cost and things like that, but we can certainly bring that information back to you.
There is one other, going back to our, I'll call it the original part of the survey. There is a group of questions which are not here. It's always hard to identify those. And I had written it down earlier and forgot to mention it. There's nothing in here that asks about future directions for the city. All of this is about existing services and nothing about what the city might do different, if you will, or new, or alternatives. And it might be possible just to ask an open-ended question, and that would be clearly a short way to do it. Or you could add, you know, should the city, for example, focus more on green stuff, environmental things? Should the city focus more on, you know, we could make up a list of suggestions for people to respond to, or we could just have an open-ended one. The open-ended one is nice because it doesn't take up much space. On the other hand, it's much harder to analyze what people say. But I would like to see some thought on what we might do, because this doesn't give us directions we might go in the future.
Councilmember, that's true, and I guess we can work on formulating a question, open-ended question that could sort of address your concerns of the future. Staff was focusing on citizen and on services and customer service, so they could find a way to improve the services that are existing, but we can definitely work on that. I must also add, the open-ended questions also have an additional fee to that. I don't have the number before me.
I do. There's actually 2 open-ended questions that are included with the various options. An additional open-ended question is about $845 for them to basically do the data analysis and the entry. And
as I said earlier, I think that they are well worth the money spent, because we found that those are the areas where we got some of the most valuable responses.
Here's a future question for you. Do you wish for Tacoma Park to remain a self-governing entity? There are those that have questions.
That's true. Well, what I was actually thinking of, and it sort of fits with the city services notion of this whole survey, is what would you like to see the city do more of, would be sort of an open-ended question that would be sort of a city service oriented. And I think when you ask people, do you think we should do more stuff on the environment, everybody's going to say yes. But the question is that, you know, if you gave people, if you said environment, you know, low affordable housing, something like that, people are going to say yes, 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 and yes. But if you ask people, what do you think the city should do more of, that's when you get, I think, what Terry mentions is sort of the interesting responses.
I think, Mayor, to follow up on a comment you made, though, about the gym, and when I say we need to talk to the survey company, obviously if you ask people what they'd like the city to do more of, at times, depending on the answer to that, there may be financial implications to that. And I think that's the one thing an open-ended question does not get at, is whether or not they'd be willing to pay more to get that, or is there some other service they think perhaps we're over-providing that if you had to switch it off as a zero-sum game, what would the answer be? But these are all things that certainly we'd be happy to talk to the survey company about and just bring back the answers to your questions at a future work session.
Maybe say do differently in the future. Something like that.
Yeah, if I could, I don't know if there's any other comments that council wanted to share, but there is one thing I just wanted to mention to the council before we move off of this. Obviously, the city started this process many, many years ago. On the advice of the city attorney's office, they have recommended that because of kind of the passage of time and in talking to the survey company, clearly postage rates have gone up. And we did go back to them, and, you know, their pricing structure has somewhat changed, primarily due to postage and increase in their staffing costs. The city attorney's office has suggested that I basically bring back the contract to essentially have the council reauthorize it, if you will, give you the current pricing, just to make sure there's a clear record of kind of where we're at today. So I did just want to mention that to you. The options that they have given basically were 5, 6, 7 pages, and then an additional open-ended question. Just because we're still having a lot of discussion, what I will probably do, and I hope to bring this back with the mayor's concurrence next week, just to go ahead and get that reauthorization, if you will, on the books, is I'll probably just go ahead and probably have a not-to-exceed price based on the longest survey, recognizing that there's been a lot of concern raised by the council about trying to keep it as short as possible.
Thank you. The final item is an update on the defibrillator issue.
I'll just make a few brief comments. I'm going to turn it over to Vanita, because she's certainly much more of an expert on defibrillators than I am. The council included $9,000 in this year's budget for the purchase of automated external defibrillators, and at that time when we were talking about this almost a year ago, the staff had raised some issues about what the training requirements would be, any potential liability on the part of the city if we did not ensure that we had properly trained staff here at all time, and things of that nature. And the council was kind enough to give us the opportunity to research that, though I certainly wish we had been able to bring this back to you sooner, so I do apologize for the delay. But since the council did include the funding in the budget, staff has been looking into this, primarily Deputy City Manager Wayne Hobbs and Ms. George. She is probably the most familiar person on the staff at this point with the defibrillators, and what I'd like her to do is maybe share with you all this evening kind of where we're at in terms of how many defibrillators we should purchase, where they should go, and just to give you some sense of the timeline of how we would move forward from this point.
Okay, Council, we have city staff. I understand that there have been a number of questions.
Somebody's going to stay. We won't have a quorum. Okay. All right. I'm just trying to make sure that we maintain a quorum.
Okay.
Sorry.
No problem.
Well, if we're going to decide to go forward with it, we need a quorum.
All right. I'll be brief. I understand there were a number of questions regarding staff training and the potential liability. And as a result, the members of the Public Safety Citizens Advisory Committee and city staff have been doing a lot of research. We understand that we have the state of Maryland has a law which protects all municipalities and organizations to maintain automatic external defibrillators for the use of any person that is suffering from a cardiac arrest on the organization's property, as long as the operators have received adequate training and we fulfill all of the requirements. The city has contacted the American Red Cross for assistance, and the American Red Cross works as a distributor of the defibrillators, of different types of defibrillators. Within your package, I provide you with a sample of what it would look like. We couldn't get a picture of the exact copy, but it looks quite similar to that. It is also required that we receive medical direction through a sponsoring physician familiar with AEDs and the associated laws. The American Red Cross has a vendor by the name of Health Force Partners, located in the state of Washington, but this organization provides this type of service for many states throughout the United States, and particularly in Maryland. The physician is familiar with the AED requirements. They work along with the cities, the municipalities, and the various organizations. The defibrillator comes with a particular card that registers any type of activity, whether it's necessary for cardiac purposes or not. And the physician will be advised at all times as to what is going on. The basic requirement is that the identified staff receive the appropriate training, AED training as well as CPR. And we've provided some numbers for you for staff. We've identified a number of staff persons. The training is actually $72 per staff person. The defibrillator itself is $1,900 apiece. The staff of American Red Cross and I have gone through several of the the various buildings, inspected and to determine where we should place the defibrillators. We basically came up with the conclusion that we should have one defibrillator in each municipal building. We would have one on each floor in the community center, one in the Department of Public Works, and one at the New Hampshire Avenue Recreational Facility. This way it would allow any operator to access the defibrillator within a 3-minute period. The defibrillators that would be located in the community center on this main floor would be right over here in the reception area, so that the library would have access to it. If we decide in the upcoming years that we would like to have a defibrillator placed at the library, then we can consider that, or at the Hefner Recreation Facility. But we've identified the cost for the defibrillators, the 5 defibrillators. In order to receive authorized medical direction for 1 year for each unit, it is actually $125. Now, we can get it for 3 years, but it is recommended, since this is the first time the city would be in the program, that we just do it for 1 year and get familiar with the process, and then move on from there. We've also identified when we can start the training. I've talked with all of the department heads. Although they have not identified, well, some department heads have identified specific staff members that will receive training. In fact, some staff have volunteered. The police department and the Department of Recreation are going to have the largest number of staff trained. In fact, the Department of Recreation plans on training all of their staff, because at any particular time, any particular staff person may be on board. The police department felt that it was important as well, because for the same reason, basically. Once we get your approval to move forward, we will be ready to contact American Red Cross and set up training. I've provided you with a schedule based on discussions with staff, as well as with the American Red Cross and their associates.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Councilmember Siemens for bringing this to the council's attention. And I want to thank the staff for putting together an enormous amount of material. I found it extremely helpful. The defibrillators are amazing little things. You don't have to be a cardiologist to use them. They have little computers in them, and they detect the person's heart rate, determine whether something is needed, and then they apply whatever's needed. So I appreciate all this information. Terry, did you want to?
Yes, I thank you, Mayor Porter, and thank you, Benita, for the thorough work that you've done in preparing this for us. I really appreciate that, and you know, the main thing I wanted to talk about tonight, City Manager Matthews has diffused somewhat by apologizing for the length of time that it took to get here, but I've been very frustrated because this was something that not only for the last year, but it's been longer than that, has been on the table, and it's, I feel, been at the risk of employees and users of our buildings. So that's all I'll say. I just hope that we can discuss at a future time how we can not take so long on some key issues like this. I'd appreciate it. As far as the defibrillators go, I had just one question, and that is, you said all rec department employees would be trained. Does that include the part-time?
Yes, sir. To my knowledge, it does. She's recommending 25 staff persons.
Okay. And that just concerns me. I think it's valuable to do that. I just wonder, is that going to be part of the normal training, because we do get some turnover in the part-time personnel?
Anita may be able to answer this better than I can, Councilmember Siemens, but obviously there's kind of the part-time seasonal staff, and there's that staff which, you know, kind of works year-round. My guess would be that Ms. Hadovan probably plans to focus on the non-seasonal staff and those that basically have a continual function.
Okay. Yeah, that makes more sense, I think. But I mean, I would like to see everybody trained in it, but I think that we have to kind of balance that against the amount of money we have in our pocketbooks.
My intentions were to contact each, to allow the director of each department to determine how many people they thought that they would need to be trained. Ms. Hadervin thought that it was important to have as many people trained as possible. Again, they will also have to be recertified on an annual basis. So we will continue. With the number of people that have been recommended for training, as you can see with the schedule, we will be doing this in phases. So you'll have the most important group or the group that's most accessible, maybe I should say it that way, be trained first, and then we'll move on from there.
I really appreciate the organization, the thought you've given to this, and I think you've answered all the questions. You know, like I said, I'd like to see all the staff trained and ready and able to use the defibrillators. I would also be interested to hear back from you offline about maybe the areas that the Red Cross said could be consideration for a second purchase of defibrillators, such as Hefner Park and some of the other facilities in the city. And also would like to get information soon so that maybe we could include a little bit of money in the budget for this coming year for defibrillators, possibly for each of the patrol cars, or at least some cars in each shift, because quite often the police are the first ones on the scene and don't have some people may not have the luxury of time to wait for an ambulance or an EMT to arrive. Other than that, I appreciate this, and I strongly encourage my colleagues to support this.
Well, I definitely support going forward with it. I think in terms of getting more defibrillators, maybe we should sort of let the program get up and running and sort of let people sort out whatever glitches might need to be sorted out, and then go ahead and expand it from there.
I'm not prepared to argue the budget issues tonight, thank you.
Are people interested in moving forward with this? Bruce, before he left, said he wanted to move forward with it, so I think unless there's strong objection, I think we're fine with that. Yeah.
I was just going to mention briefly in response to Councilmember Seaman's comments, both Chief Rakucci and I have worked in jurisdictions that have defibrillators in their patrol cars. Memory's a little hazy since I've been gone a couple of years from my last position, but I believe the devices themselves are slightly more expensive because of kind of the wear and tear of being in a car, but that may be something you want to talk to Chief Rakucci about during the budget work session, since he has, they did that in Front Royal, he indicated to me.
Thank you.
And I can also provide you some information. American Red Cross, one of the questions they asked if the city was pursuing that, we were targeting the structures more so, and so I can give you some information as well.
Thank you.
Okay, well, if there's nothing else, we're adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, Vanita.
You're welcome.
This has been your evening to
yes,
cover issues.
I haven't been here in a long time. I guess I made up for it.